The sentencing, October 2024. The guidelines debate. Federal sentencing operates under detailed guidelines that judges use to determine appropriate punishment. For Mann Act violations, the base sentence depends on various factors, but typically falls in the range of 24 to 36 months for cases without aggravating circumstances. The prosecution's position. Prosecutors argued for an upward departure from the guidelines, a longer sentence than typically imposed, based on several factors. Pattern of behavior. While the jury acquitted on racketeering, prosecutors argued the evidence showed a pattern of exploitative behavior that warranted enhanced punishment, abuse of power. They emphasized that Diddy's wealth, fame, and industry position enabled the criminal conduct and made him particularly culpable. Victim impact. Testimony from the two women whose cases resulted in conviction, plus statements from other women whose allegations didn't lead to conviction, painted a picture of significant harm. Former girlfriend testimony. Most controversially, prosecutors presented testimony from former girlfriends describing coercive and controlling behavior in their relationships with Diddy. The defense's position. Diddy's attorneys argued for a sentence at the low end of the guidelines or even probation. Limited convictions. He was convicted only on 2 relatively minor charges after being acquitted of the most serious allegations. First offense. Diddy had no prior criminal record. Context matters. The relationships in question were complicated but shouldn't be reduced to simple criminal transactions, charitable works. His extensive philanthropy and positive contributions to communities should weigh in his favor. Improper evidence. They objected strenuously to the introduction of testimony about acquitted conduct, arguing it was legally improper to punish Diddy for things the jury had specifically found he didn't do. The judge's decision. Judge Sarah Morrison, a veteran of the federal bench appointed 15 years earlier, had a reputation as tough but fair. She had presided over the entire trial and heard every piece of evidence. After both sides presented their sentencing arguments, she took a brief recess to consider the ruling. When Judge Morrison returned, her sentencing statement was detailed and forceful. Mr. Combs, a jury of your peers has found you guilty of 2 serious federal crimes. While you were acquitted of the most serious charges, that does not erase the harm caused by the conduct for which you were convicted. I have reviewed the evidence presented at trial, the pre-sentence investigation report, the letters submitted on your behalf, and the victim impact statements. I've also carefully considered the arguments made by both sides regarding appropriate punishment. What troubles me most is the pattern of behavior suggested by the evidence. While the jury did not find that pattern rose to the level of racketeering or systematic trafficking, I cannot ignore what I heard during this trial. Multiple women described similar experiences. They spoke of relationships that began with opportunity and glamour but evolved into situations where they felt controlled, exploited, and afraid to leave. Your wealth and position in the entertainment industry gave you tremendous power over these women. You used that power not to mentor or support, but to manipulate and exploit. That is an aggravating factor that warrants a significant sentence. Under the federal guidelines, the recommended sentence range for your convictions is 27 to 33 months. However, I find that an upward departure is warranted based on the totality of the circumstances, the abuse of your position of trust and power, and the need to deter others who might believe their fame and wealth place them above the law. Therefore, I hereby sentence you to 50 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. The courtroom reaction. The sentence landed like a thunderclap. Diddy's mother, seated in the front row, audibly gasped and began crying. His legal team immediately protected that they would appeal. Supporters outside the courthouse were stunned. They had expected at most a couple of years, possibly even probation. The prosecution, meanwhile, was satisfied. While they might have hoped for longer, 50 months represented a significant victory, especially given the acquittals on the major charges. Victims' advocates had mixed reactions. Some felt justice had been served. Others worried that even 50 months was insufficient given the scope of alleged misconduct. Life behind bars. FCI Otisville. Diddy was designated to the Federal Correctional Institution at Otisville, a medium-security prison in upstate New York, about 70 miles northwest of New York City. Known for housing white-collar criminals and lower-level offenders, Otisville is considered one of the more desirable federal facilities, though desirable is a relative term when discussing prison. The facility. Capacity of approximately 800 inmates, known for its substantial Jewish population and kosher meal options, offers various educational and vocational programs. Notable former inmates include Michael Cohen and Mike, the Situation Sorrentino. Diddy's adjustment. For someone who lived in penthouses, traveled by private jet, and commanded rooms with his mere presence, prison life represents a jarring adjustment. Loss of control. Every aspect of daily life is regulated. When to wake, when to eat, when to sleep, where to go, what to wear. Loss of privacy. Constant surveillance, limited personal space, and the impossibility of solitude. Loss of identity. He's no longer Diddy or Puff or Sean Combs, mogul. He's an inmate number 76543-054. Loss of comfort. Basic amenities taken for granted in his previous life. Quality food, comfortable bedding, climate control, entertainment are now luxuries of the past. Reports from inside. According to sources close to Diddy and reports from his legal team's prison visits, he maintains a low profile, avoiding the celebrity inmate spotlights, taking advantage of educational programs. Reportedly working on a business degree, he spends significant time in the law library, researching his case and appeal. Has struggled with the isolation from his children and family. Has experienced the reality that fame and wealth mean little behind bars. The reality check. One of Diddy's attorneys, speaking on background, described his client's state of mind. He's a humbled man. Prison has a way of stripping away everything superficial. He's been forced to confront things about himself, his choices, his impact on others. Whether that leads to genuine change remains to be seen, but the process has been profound. Building the appeal. The legal team. Diddy's appeal is being handled by some of the most prominent appellate lawyers in the country. Lead counsel. Jennifer Martinez. Former Supreme Court clerk, specializes in criminal appeals, known for winning seemingly unwinnable cases. Track record of getting convictions overturned on technical grounds. Supporting team. Constitutional law experts, sentencing guidelines specialists, former federal prosecutors who understand how the government thinks, investigators continuing to develop new evidence. The team's strategy is aggressive, multi-pronged, and designed to attack the conviction and sentence from every possible angle. The core arguments. The appeal brief filed with the Second Circuit Court of Appeals spans over 200 pages and makes several key arguments. Argument 1. Improper consideration of acquitted conduct. The legal principle. One of the most controversial aspects of federal sentencing is the practice of allowing judges to consider conduct for which a defendant was acquitted when determining the sentence for convicted conduct. This seems to contradict the fundamental principle that acquittal means not guilty. The defense position. Diddy's lawyers argue that Judge Morrison violated his constitutional rights by explicitly considering the racketeering and modern slavery trafficking allegations when sentencing him for the Mann Act violations. The jury specifically rejected the prosecution's theory that Mr. Combs operated a criminal enterprise or engaged in modern slavery trafficking. Yet the sentencing judge based her upward departure almost entirely on testimony and evidence related to those acquitted charges. This is not merely improper, it's unconstitutional. The government cannot do through sentencing what it failed to do at trial: convict Mr. Combs of serious crimes. If the Constitution's requirement of proof beyond a reasonable doubt means anything, it must mean that a judge cannot impose punishment based on conduct the jury found did not occur or was not proven. To hold otherwise makes the jury's role a nullity and transforms acquittal from exoneration into a mere formality. The legal precedent. This argument invokes several Supreme Court decisions that have questioned the practice of considering acquitted conduct at sentencing, though the court has never definitively ruled it unconstitutional. The defense hopes the Second Circuit will be willing to break new ground on this issue. Argument 2. Insufficient evidence. The challenge. The defense argues that even the two convictions the jury returned were not supported by sufficient evidence to sustain a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. Regarding the first count, the defense contends that the relationship with the first woman was clearly consensual, that financial support provided was part of a dating relationship rather than payment for prostitution, and that travel occurred for social purposes rather than for illegal activity. They point to text messages, social media posts, and witness testimony suggesting a genuine relationship. They argue the prosecution cherry-picked evidence to create a false narrative regarding the second count. Similarly, they argue the second relationship was consensual and that characterizing it as prostitution was a misapplication of the Mann Act. They note that the woman in question had a successful career, wasn't dependent on Diddy financially, and traveled of her own free will. The broader point. The defense argues that the government essentially criminalized Diddy's lifestyle and relationships, using an antiquated law to prosecute consensual adult behavior that might be distasteful to some but isn't actually criminal. Argument 3. Excessive sentence. Comparative analysis. The defense brief includes detailed analysis of similar Mann Act cases over the past 2 decades. They present a compelling statistical argument. Average sentence for Mann Act violations without trafficking enhancements, 18 months median sentence for cases involving 2 counts, 24-month sentences exceeding 40 months are rare and typically involve minors or significant coercion. Diddy's 50-month sentence, they argue, is an outlier, not because his conduct was worse, but because he's famous and the judge wanted to make an example of him. Celebrity justice. The brief directly confronts the elephant in the room. Mr. Combs is not receiving equal justice under law. He is receiving celebrity justice, a sentence enhanced not by the facts of his case, but by his public profile. The court punished him not for what he did, but for who he is. This is the antithesis of blind justice and cannot be allowed to stand. Argument 4. Trial errors. The brief identifies numerous alleged errors in how the trial was conducted. Evidentiary rulings. The judge allowed prejudicial evidence that should have been excluded, including testimony about uncharged conduct and prior relationships. Jury instructions. The instructions given to the jury on key legal issues were confusing and potentially misleading. Prosecutorial misconduct. Allegations that prosecutors made improper arguments and exceeded appropriate bounds in their presentations. Media prejudice. The intense media coverage made a fair trial impossible, and the judge should have granted a change of venue or sequestered the jury. Each of these arguments alone might not overturn a conviction, but together they create a cumulative case that something went fundamentally wrong in this trial. Argument 5. Constitutional violations. The brief raises several constitutional issues. Due process. The procedures followed violated Diddy's right to fair process under the Fifth Amendment. Equal protection. Selective prosecution based on his celebrity status violated the 14th Amendment. Eighth Amendment. The sentence constitutes cruel and unusual punishment given the nature of the offenses. These constitutional arguments are designed to create hooks for potential Supreme Court review if the appeal fails at the circuit level. The request for immediate release. Bail pending appeal. Perhaps the most dramatic aspect of the appeal is the motion for Diddy's immediate release on bail, while the appeal is pending. This is an uphill battle. Defendants convicted at trial and sentenced to prison are rarely granted bail pending appeal. The legal standard. To win release pending appeal, the defense must prove. The appeal raises substantial questions of law or fact that could result in reversal or a significantly reduced sentence. Diddy is not a flight risk. Diddy does not pose a danger to the community. The balance of hardships favors release. The flight risk argument. The defense addresses this head-on. Mr. Combs has every incentive to see his appeal through rather than flee. He has substantial ties to the United States. His children, his mother, his businesses, and his entire life are here. He is one of the most recognizable people in the world. There is literally nowhere he could hide. Moreover, we propose stringent conditions: house arrest with GPS monitoring, surrender of passport, $50 million bonds secured by real property, regular check-ins with pretrial services. These conditions would make flight virtually impossible, while allowing Mr. Combs to contribute to society and prepare his defense rather than languishing in prison for years while his appeal proceeds. The danger argument. The prosecution will likely argue that Diddy's pattern of behavior toward women makes him a danger to the community. The defense counters. The jury specifically rejected the prosecution's characterization of Mr. Combs as someone who systematically exploits and endangers women. The acquittals on racketeering and trafficking charges demonstrate the jury did not find him to be the predatory figure the prosecution painted. The Mann Act violations he was convicted of occurred years ago and involved specific individuals in specific circumstances. There is no evidence, none, that Mr. Combs currently poses any threat to anyone. The appropriate place to address those historical issues is through appeal, not through pretrial detention. The substantial question argument. This is where the defense believes they have their strongest case. They argue that the issues raised in the appeal, particularly the use of acquitted conduct at sentencing, present novel and important legal questions that have a legitimate chance of resulting in reversal. The Second Circuit has never squarely addressed whether considering acquitted conduct at sentencing violates the Constitution when that consideration is the primary basis for an upward departure. This case presents that question cleanly. Several circuit judges have expressed skepticism about this practice in concurring and dissenting opinions. The Supreme Court has signaled it may be willing to address the issue in the right case. Given the likelihood that this sentence will be vacated on appeal, keeping Mr. Combs imprisoned serves no purpose except punishment for punishment's sake. Justice demands that he be released pending the resolution of these substantial legal questions. The prosecution's response. Though prosecutors haven't filed a formal response yet, court watchers expect their arguments to include precedent. Bail pending appeal is rare, and Diddy hasn't met the high bar required, flight risk. Despite his fame, he has the resources to disappear if he chooses, and the prospect of years in prison creates strong motivation to flee. Merit of appeal. The legal issues raised, while creative, don't rise to the level of substantial questions that would justify release. Public safety. Even if he's not currently engaging in criminal conduct, releasing him sends a terrible message about accountability, justice for victims. The women who testified deserve to see justice served, not watch their abuser released after serving less than a year. The appeals court consideration. The Second Circuit. The United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, based in Manhattan, will hear Diddy's appeal. This court has a reputation as one of the most intellectually rigorous appellate courts in the country, with judges who aren't afraid to overturn convictions when they identify legal errors. The three-judge panel. Appeals are typically heard by a three-judge panel randomly selected from the court's active and senior judges. The composition of this panel could significantly impact the outcome. Possible outcomes. Affirm the conviction and sentence. Find no reversible error and uphold everything. Affirm conviction. Vacate sentence. Agree the trial was fair but find the sentence was improper, sending it back for resentencing. Reverse conviction. Find reversible error in the trial itself and either dismiss the charges or order a new trial. Partial reversal. Overturn one conviction while upholding the other, requiring resentencing. Timeline. Appeals move slowly, even on an expedited schedule. Briefing. 3 to 4 months oral arguments. 2 to 3 months after briefing completes decision. 2 to 6 months after oral arguments. Realistically, a decision is probably 12 to 18 months away, potentially longer if there are delays or requests for additional briefing. The bail decision. The request for immediate release will be decided much faster, likely within 2 to 3 months. A single judge can rule on this motion, though it will ultimately be decided by the full panel assigned to the case. Public opinion and media coverage. The divided public. Public reaction to Diddy's appeal has been sharply divided. Team Diddy. Supporters argue the sentence is excessive and vindictive. He was acquitted of the most serious charges. The justice system is being weaponized against a successful black man. He deserves a chance to fight his case from outside prison. Team Justice. The critics contend he got off easy given the scope of his misconduct. The acquittals were likely compromises by a divided jury, not exoneration. His wealth and fame have already given him advantages most defendants don't have. Releasing him would send a terrible message about accountability. The exhausted middle. Many people are simply tired of the story. There's a sense of scandal fatigue, a feeling that we've been through this cycle too many times with too many celebrities. Celebrity reactions. The entertainment industry has been notably quiet about Diddy's appeal. Most artists and executives have learned that weighing in on these situations is fraught with risk. Support him and you might be seen as condoning abuse. Criticize him, and you might face accusations of piling on or abandoning a colleague. A few notable exceptions. Former collaborators. Some artists who worked with Diddy early in their careers have spoken about their conflicted feelings, gratitude for opportunities he provided mixed with disappointment about allegations and conviction. Industry reform advocates. Several organizations focused on protecting artists and addressing abuse in entertainment have used Diddy's case as an example of why systematic reforms are needed. Legal analysts, Court TV, and various legal commentators have provided extensive analysis, with most predicting the appeal faces long odds, but acknowledging the sentencing issue presents a legitimate legal question. Social media. Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok have been battlegrounds for debates about the case. #FreeDiddyNow trends periodically among his supporters. #JusticeForVictims is used by those who believe he deserves his sentence. Conspiracy theories abound, with some claiming he's being targeted for his success. The broader implications. For celebrity justice. Diddy's case raises fundamental questions about how the legal system handles famous defendants. Do celebrities get better treatment? Better lawyers, more resources for investigation, and appeals, public pressure for leniency, ability to shape narratives through media. Or worse treatment. Judges wanting to show they're not swayed by fame, extra harsh sentences to make examples, media circus, making fair trials difficult, public pressure for harsh punishment. The answer? Probably both, depending on the case and context. Diddy has certainly benefited from high-quality legal representation most defendants couldn't afford. But there's also an argument that his sentence was enhanced specifically because of his celebrity status. For the Mann Act. This case has reignited debates about the Mann Act and its modern application. Historical context. Originally passed to combat forced prostitution used during the early 20th century to prosecute interracial relationships and other immoral conduct, reformed over the years, but still carries potential for misuse. Current debate. Is it appropriate to use this law to prosecute consensual adult relationships? Does characterizing financial support in relationships as prostitution criminalize normal behavior? Should the law be further reformed or even repealed? Some legal scholars have used Diddy's case as an example of why the Mann Act needs modernization, arguing it allows prosecutors to criminalize behavior that might be problematic but isn't the kind of coercive trafficking the law was meant to address. For sentencing reform. The controversy over Judge Morrison considering acquitted conduct highlights a broader debate in criminal justice. The practice. Federal judges can consider conduct for which defendants were acquitted when determining sentences. This is based on the different burden of proof. Criminal conviction requires proof beyond reasonable doubt, while sentencing decisions use a preponderance of evidence. Standard critics call this acquitted conduct sentencing fundamentally unfair. Reform efforts. Several bills have been introduced in Congress to prohibit this practice. Some states have already banned it in their court systems. Appellate courts have questioned it, but haven't definitively ruled it unconstitutional. Diddy's case has become a rallying point for sentencing reform advocates, regardless of what people think about his guilt or innocence on the underlying charges. What happens next? Short-term scenarios. Scenario 1. Bail granted. If the appeals court grants Diddy's motion for release, pending appeal, he would be released on strict conditions. Within days, he could return to some business activities. Though his empire is much diminished, he would have an opportunity to rehabilitate his public image while the appeal proceeds. The decision would be controversial, with victims' advocates condemning it as injustice. Scenario 2. Bail denied. If the request for immediate release is denied, Diddy remains in prison while the appeal proceeds, likely for at least another year. His businesses continue to struggle without his direct involvement. His legal team proceeds with the appeal, but without the urgency that comes from having their client free. Public attention gradually shifts to other stories. Long-term possibilities. Best case for Diddy. The appeals court finds reversible error, either overturning the convictions entirely and dismissing the charges, or ordering a new trial where he's acquitted or prosecution declines to retry, or vacating the sentence and ordering resentencing with instructions that result in time served or minimal additional time. In this scenario, Diddy could potentially rebuild aspects of his career and reputation, though he'd never fully escape the shadow of the allegations and trial. Middle ground. The appeals court finds the trial was fair, but the sentence was excessive. Conviction is upheld, but sentence is reduced to time served or close to it. Diddy is released relatively quickly, but as a convicted felon he faces a lifetime of being a registered modern slavery offender. His business and entertainment career are permanently limited. He becomes primarily known for his legal troubles rather than his achievements. Worst case for Diddy. The appeals court affirms everything. Conviction stands, sentence stands, he serves the full 50 months. Projected release in 2028, he emerges at age 59, having spent his mid to late 50s in prison. Whatever business empire remained is gone. His legacy is irreparably tarnished. He spends his remaining years seeking some form of redemption that may never come. The human cost. The victims, lost in the legal maneuvering and media coverage, are the real people whose lives have been affected by this case. The two women whose cases led to conviction. Both have had to relive traumatic experiences publicly, endure cross-examination designed to discredit them, and watch as half the public calls them heroes while the other half calls them liars and opportunists. One of them, speaking through her attorney, said, "I just wanted justice. I wanted to be heard and believed. I got that in some ways, but the cost has been enormous. My privacy is gone. My life has been turned upside down, and I'm not sure if any of this was worth it." The women who testified but saw no conviction. For those whose allegations didn't result in criminal charges or where the jury acquitted, the experience has been particularly difficult. They found the courage to come forward, put themselves through the trauma of testifying, only to watch the jury decide that either it didn't happen or couldn't be proven beyond reasonable doubt. One such woman posted on social media, "I told my truth. Whether the jury believed it or not doesn't change what I experienced. But I can't lie, this whole process has been devastating. I feel like I went through it all for nothing." The ripple effects. Relationships destroy careers, affected mental health struggles, ongoing therapy, and healing processes. The knowledge that this story will follow them forever. Diddy's family. His family has also paid a price. His mother, Janice Combs, has been steadfastly supportive of her son, attending court proceedings and maintaining his innocence. Watching her son be convicted and imprisoned has taken a visible toll. His children. His 6 children from multiple relationships face the challenge of having a father in prison, dealing with public scrutiny, and reconciling the father they know with the person described in court. One of his older children posted, "He's my dad. I love him. I also know he's made mistakes. I don't know how to hold both of those things at once, but I'm trying." His former partners, women who had relationships with Diddy, some of whom testified against him, others who remained supportive, all face their own complex emotional landscapes. The broader community. The case has affected the broader community in various ways. Artists and employees. Those whose careers were built through bad boy entertainment face questions about their association with Diddy and their own complicity in or blindness to what was happening. The music industry. The industry itself has been forced to reckon with its culture, its protection of powerful figures, and its treatment of vulnerable artists and employees. Fans. Those who grew up with Diddy's music, were inspired by his business success, or admired his cultural impact, face the difficult process of reconciling art with artist, achievement with abuse. Epilogue. Justice and closure. The elusive goal. As Diddy's legal team files brief after brief, as the appeals court considers his arguments, as the media dissects every development, one question hangs over everything. Will there ever be closure? For some, closure came with the verdict, justice served, accountability achieved. For others, it will come only when Diddy completes his sentence and pays his debt to society. For still others, no amount of legal process will provide closure because the harm runs too deep. The lessons. What can we learn from this saga? About power. Power without accountability is dangerous. Whether you're a music mogul, a Hollywood executive, a tech titan, or any other form of powerful person, unchecked authority inevitably leads to abuse. About justice. Our legal system is imperfect. It sometimes gets things wrong, it often takes too long, and it doesn't always provide the healing victims need. But it's what we have, and cases like this test whether it can adapt to handle complex situations involving the rich and famous. about celebrity. Fame and wealth are not protective shields. They might delay accountability, but eventually, the truth tends to emerge. The harder fall from grace serves as a warning to others about the cost of abuse and exploitation. About change, real change requires more than punishing individual bad actors. It requires addressing the systems, cultures, and structures that enable bad behavior in the first place. The waiting game. For now, we wait. We wait for the appeals court to rule on bail. We wait for the full appeal to be heard and decided. We wait to see if this case will lead to meaningful reforms or simply fade into the background as the next scandal emerges. Diddy waits too, in his cell at FCI Otisville. He waits for legal developments, for visits from family, for phone calls from his lawyers. He waits to see if his final appeal will succeed, or if he'll spend the next several years behind bars. The victims wait for true healing, which may never fully come regardless of legal outcomes. The public waits to see how this story ends, even as attention inevitably shifts to newer dramas. And the system itself waits to be tested, to see if it can deliver justice that satisfies competing demands for punishment, rehabilitation, deterrence, and healing. This story doesn't have an ending yet. The appeal is pending. The legal arguments are being refined. The court will eventually rule. But whatever happens legally, the broader story about power, about accountability, about what we demand from our heroes and how we respond when they fail us, that story continues. Diddy's final appeal is about more than one man's freedom. It's about whether our justice system can handle these complex cases with both fairness and firmness. It's about whether we've learned anything from the countless similar stories that came before. It's about whether this time, finally, will be different. Only time will tell. For now, the legal battle continues. The debates rage on, and Sean Diddy Combs sits in a prison cell, hoping for a second chance at freedom that may or may not come. The final chapter has yet to be written. This case is ongoing. Check back for updates as the appeal proceeds and court decisions are rendered.